Hello students, today we're going to read a story about an artist who overcame a lot of hardship. She lived in an island in Canada called Nova Scotia, and she never traveled more than 30 miles away from where she was born. Her name is Maud Lewis. Even though she never had any formal education, Maud Lewis managed to bring a lot of joy to people in her artwork. So we're going to read this book called Capturing Joy, the Story of Maud Lewis. It's by Joellen Bogart. It's illustrated by Mark Lang. A small figure moved through the crisp snow of a January evening. She knocked on the door of a tiny house by the highway where Everett Lewis, the fish peddler, lived. Everett had advertised for a housekeeper, but Maud Dowley knew that the lonely man needed a wife and companion, and she knew that she should be that wife. It was not long before Maud married Everett and moved in to share his life. She accepted that it would not be a life of luxury. The house had just one small room with a sleeping loft up above. There was no indoor plumbing or electricity, and hardly any room to turn around. Maud began to do the cooking and the housework, but it was hard for her. She was not strong because her shoulders were hunched from birth defects, and her hands were crippled from arthritis. As time passed, Everett went back to doing most of the housework as he had done for years, and Maud went back to an activity that she loved, painting. As a child, she had painted Christmas cards with her mother, Agnes, in a comfortable house in South Ohio, Nova Scotia, where Maud had been born. Her mother's family always had artistic ability, and Agnes encouraged her daughter to develop her talents. Little Maud had played the piano until her hands became too misshapen to manage the keys. Unfortunately, her disability didn't prevent her from holding a paintbrush. In her new home, Maud began to paint Christmas cards again, selling them for a nickel, often to Everett's customers on his fish peddling route. The Christmas cards have scenes of sleepy villages under falling snow, whirling skaters on frozen ponds, bluebirds surprised by an early snowfall, or a single horse pulling a sleigh. When she moved on to larger paintings, Everett used his scrounging talents to get materials for Maud's work. He found discarded cans of paint from fishing boats and scraped off the dried layer to reveal the good paint that was underneath. Sometimes in the paint cans, if you have oil-based paint, they'll have almost like a skin on top, and you can poke through there, and then there's fresh paint underneath that. He cut uneven panels from cast-off scraps and wooden cardboard for her to paint on. With a metal TV tray as her easel and her paint squeezed into little sardine cans, Maud painted for hours straight, supporting her painting hand with the other. Sitting in the corner by the house's one window, Maud began to create scenes from the early years of her life. Though her frail health had hurt her school attendance, Maud's paintings often showed children heading to school or on the school playground. Bright colors and outstretched arms tell of happy, active children. Maud's joyful memories of school in South Ohio remained, in spite of the cruel teasing she suffered after her family moved to another town called Yarmouth. This is children at school. Maud's father, Jack Dowley, had been a blacksmith and a harness maker. She remembered him watching as he lovingly fashioned the leather harnesses for the oxen, each one different and perfectly fitted. Maud's painted images of oxen with sweet faces and comical eyelashes, wearing beautiful yokes and harnesses with bells. Maud had a love of animals, and her family always had a cat. Bright-eyed kittens grew from her bushes, usually surrounded by flowers and butterflies. Her farm scenes with horses and chickens showed gentle people caring for animals. Maud also painted wildlife, like a mother deer with her fawn before a lake at sunset. Maud's married life still included animals. Poor as they were, she and Everett always had pets about the house. 3 black cats. As a child, Maud and her family enjoyed day-long outings on a fringe-top horse and buggy. How happy these outings must have been, with fresh air, the sound of the horses' hooves, and laughter. Maud painted many scenes of people going out for a ride. Here's a scene of the coastal town that she lived. Maud left school at the age of 14 and led a quiet life in her parents' house. She might have expected to go on living with her mother and father as they grew old. However, when she was in her early 30s, she suffered the loss of both of her parents. She stayed with her older brother, Charles, for a while, but then she was soon to live with her aunt, Ida Germain. Charles went off to war, and though he survived, he never came back to the island or saw his sister again. Aunt Ida was a kind woman, and she lived in a coastal town. It was here that Maud observed all the seaside life that would appear in much of her work. Another subject of Maud's painting was the old Model T that Everett had owned when they married. It shows them going out for a ride. Maud would often depict her husband, Everett, in her paintings. The man that Maud spent half of her life with was known to be difficult and miserly. That means that he didn't like to spend any extra money. Everett had suffered a hard childhood. He lived in poverty with his mother after his father left. Mother and son spent years at the poor farm, next to where Everett later placed the little house that he had bought. The younger Everett worked for his keep. He stayed with different families. Sometimes he didn't get enough food to eat. As an adult, Everett was very good at making do with what he could find for free. He hated to spend any extra money. He was so afraid of being hungry again that he would not buy the simple things that would have made their life more comfortable. A few good friends would look after Maud so she would not suffer too much. Still, Maud included her husband in many of her paintings, with his lanky frame and red hat, showing him as a capable and hardworking man. Horses hauling logs in winter. This painting is called Cape Islander. Some of Maud's paintings show scenes that very rarely or never really happen. Brightly colored autumn leaves and snow can be explained by a very early snowfall. But what about the explanation for fluffy pink blossoms on evergreen trees? Maud had her own vision of beauties. Cows grazing among flowering spruces. Here's a snowy landscape with green hills in the distance. After Everett sold the Model T car, Maud seldom left the little house. She seemed content to watch the world pass by on the highway that ran just a stone's throw from her door. While Maud was creating her paintings to sell, she was also turning the little house into a work of art. She painted the stairs to the sleeping loft, the stacked bread boxes where they stored their food, the walls, and even the wood stove. Bright flowers, birds, and butterflies brightened the front doors, and tulips adorned the window glass. Maud Lewis did not seek fame, but the word of her charming paintings spread from her home. Travelers began to stop by and buy paintings from this cheerful but very shy artist. Maud gained much attention from newspaper and magazine articles written about her and from a television program. The number of requests for paintings got larger and larger until Maud had trouble keeping up. She had headaches that was made worse by the paint fumes and wood stove fumes, and it slowed her down, and sometimes Everett would pick up a brush to help. When Maud was 67, her health failed, and she died in 1970. Maud Lewis was buried in a cemetery near her home. Many people came to say goodbye to the tiny woman whose paintings had brought them so much enjoyment. Since then, she's become one of Canada's best known and best loved folk artists. The joy that she captured in every painting lives on. The Art Gallery of Nova Scotia rescued the little house that she lived in because as it was falling in disrepair. And they put up a memorial where the house stood, and the original house is now housed and restored in the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, where there's a gallery for Maud Lewis's work.